A $15 cotton t-shirt. No logo, no designer tags. Just a simple piece of fabric you bought in a pack of 3. Have you ever wondered exactly when a plain, boring shirt becomes the ultimate status symbol? You used to think power meant wearing something that made people turn and look. But real power is being completely invisible. There are 8 quiet moments when your wardrobe shifts from a display of wealth to an absolute shield of freedom. And moment number 6, it will completely change how you look at every designer logo you see on the street. This is the first moment. The realization that dressing to impress other people is just an expensive form of social tax. A few years ago, you couldn't imagine walking into a meeting without a recognized brand on your chest or your belt. You needed them to know you belonged. You needed the validation that came from wearing your paycheck on your sleeve. Because if you looked the part, nobody would guess how dangerously close your bank account was to zero at the end of the month. Not because you loved the clothes, not because they were comfortable, but because the fear of looking average was absolutely exhausting. Now you stand in front of that same mirror, getting ready for the same office, but everything feels entirely different. Your bank account has a 7-figure investment portfolio quietly compounding in the background, yet your outfit costs less than a decent lunch. You no longer need to borrow credibility from a luxury brand. Your confidence doesn't wash off in the laundry anymore. True wealth doesn't scream for attention. It just quietly buys your peace of mind. You grab your keys and step out the door perfectly camouflaged. But tomorrow at the office elevator, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. You step into the morning elevator holding your simple coffee. You think the ride up is just a quiet commute, but it's actually a daily financial scoreboard. The heavy metal doors slide shut. Standing right next to you is a coworker, wearing a designer belt with a gold buckle roughly the size of a fist. A few years ago, you would have stared at that glowing logo. You would have quietly calculated exactly how many paychecks it took to afford it. Not anymore. Now you just look straight ahead. Because you finally understand the halo effect, the dangerous social illusion that expensive fabric and shiny hardware somehow equal a completely secure financial reality. Your coworker aggressively adjusts their flashy bag, making absolutely sure the brand name catches the harsh, overhead elevator lighting. They desperately need you to see it. Have you ever noticed how the people trying the absolute hardest to look rich usually look the most internally exhausted? You think they are successfully buying status and respect, but really they are just buying the heavy, endless pressure of keeping up an expensive daily illusion. You calmly look down at your own $15 plain cotton shirt. It has no logo, no prestige, and absolutely zero expectations attached to its seams. You chose this. Not because you are cheap, not because you don't appreciate nice things, but because you completely refuse to wear a stressful financial billboard. You realize your boring outfit acts like a psychological stealth shield. It entirely deflects the petty jealousy, the unspoken office judgments, and the silent financial competitions. Complete invisibility. The ultimate form of protection. While they quietly stress over upcoming credit card bills to fund their elevator runway, your invisible wealth is peacefully compounding in the background. Real wealth doesn't demand attention. It just quietly observes the noise. You step out of the elevator completely unbothered, enjoying your secret. But when you walk into a luxury store later, the true cost of clothing becomes undeniable. You think buying a $500 jacket is a well-deserved reward for your hard work. But it is actually a penalty on your future freedom. You step further into the boutique. The air is perfectly climate-controlled, and the price tags are carefully hidden inside the heavy seams. You pull out a tiny, thick piece of cardboard attached to a simple black coat. $500. Just fabric. Just thread. Just a highly marketed illusion of prestige that evaporates the moment you leave the store. A few years ago, you would have swiped your credit card without thinking, terrified of looking out of place, desperate to prove you belonged here. You used to look at a high price tag and anxiously calculate how to squeeze it into your monthly budget. Now you look at that exact same number and you calculate something completely different. This is the dangerous trap of lifestyle inflation. The more money you earn, the more expensive your daily camouflage becomes until you are trapped again. Suddenly, that price tag doesn't show dollars anymore. It automatically converts into the exact number of hours you have to sit in a cubicle to pay for it. 50 hours of your life. Gone. Traded for a piece of fabric you will get bored of in exactly 3 months. Not because the coat is magical, not because it will somehow change your life, but because you are paying a massive premium just for a tiny woven label. The shop assistant gives your $15 t-shirt a quick, judgmental glance, fully expecting you to feel embarrassed. You don't. They think you are putting it back because you can't afford it. They have absolutely no idea you are putting it back because you simply value your freedom more. You walk out empty-handed, but significantly richer. And that unspent money is about to do something incredible in the background. That $500 didn't just disappear into the cash register of a brand that doesn't actually care about you. Instead of hanging in your closet, waiting to go out of style, it was quietly transferred straight into your investment account. You used to believe that earning more money simply meant buying more expensive versions of everyday items. But that is just a trap. A heavy hamster wheel perfectly coated in gold plating to make it look like a throne. Now you look at your plain, boring t-shirt and you feel an overwhelming sense of absolute freedom. Because you finally understand that true wealth is simply the portion of your income you explicitly choose not to spend. Not a luxury car, not a designer coat, just the quiet peace of mind sitting safely in the background. Remember that question from the very beginning? When exactly a cheap shirt becomes the ultimate status symbol? It happens the exact moment you realize you no longer need anyone's external permission to feel completely successful. Your wardrobe is no longer a performance. It is a protective shield keeping you perfectly hidden in plain sight. But this invisible shield often triggers a very strange reaction from the people who are still desperately playing the game. Which brings us to the third sign surviving the unspoken financial scoreboard of the corporate break room. You walk in to get water. Your coworker is already there, casually placing a massive, heavily branded designer bag right in the center of the table. They loudly complain about inflation and the cost of living, desperately hoping someone will notice the expensive leather they just went into debt to acquire. You say absolutely nothing. You just take a quiet sip of your water. And suddenly your silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. Your absolute refusal to participate in the game makes them deeply uncomfortable. So they instinctively try to drag you down to their level. They look at your faded $15 cotton shirt with a highly exaggerated look of fake sympathy. They loudly ask if you are struggling with bills lately, completely assuming your lack of logos is a tragic sign of financial failure. Not a single muscle in your body tenses up. Instead, you feel a warm, quiet wave of absolute victory wash over you, because true wealth is a master of disguise. To the completely untrained eye, ultimate financial freedom often looks exactly like a lack of options. They honestly think you can't afford a bag like theirs, but you know their bag is the exact reason they can never afford to quit this job. In the corporate scoreboard of life, the loudest players are usually losing by the widest margins. You sit back down at your desk, completely unbothered, perfectly comfortable in your cheap shirt, leaving their heavy leather anchor sitting right there on the table. But then an expensive, thick paper envelope lands on your desk. A mandatory corporate networking dinner is scheduled for next week. 3 years ago, an invitation like this would have sent you straight to the luxury mall in an absolute panic. You used to buy an incredibly stiff, deeply uncomfortable suit just to spend 3 miserable hours impressing people you didn't even like. That is the painful cost of playing the traditional corporate game. You literally wrap yourself in discomfort just to secure your paycheck. But now things are completely different. You look down at your plain, incredibly soft cotton shirt, because you have reached a quiet milestone called FU money, and it grants you a very specific superpower. It is the absolute power to prioritize your physical comfort over someone else's fragile expectations. The night of the mandatory corporate dinner arrives. You walk into the grand ballroom wearing a simple, incredibly comfortable, unbranded outfit. You think a room full of high-earning professionals looks like a runway, but it actually just looks like a room full of profound anxiety. A few years ago, you would have been exactly like them, nervously pulling at an itchy designer tag just to ensure you fit in. Not because you liked the clothes, not because they felt good, but because you were terrified of looking like you didn't belong. Your coworker spots you. They are wearing a highly restrictive designer suit complete with a shiny logo so large it literally reflects the chandelier. They look physically exhausted, yet they force a wide, desperate smile, terrified of missing a career opportunity. They spend the entire evening carefully monitoring who is looking at them, desperately trying to network their way into financial security. You watch them shift their weight, wincing slightly as their incredibly expensive leather shoes physically pinch their feet. You realize they are treating this dinner like a high-stakes survival audition. But you are just here for the free appetizers. No pressure, no desperate networking, no tight shoes, because when your bank account is quietly secure, you completely lose the desire to perform for people you don't even like. You don't need their validation. You don't need their approval. You already have a 7-figure portfolio quietly backing you up. You glance at your plain watch. It's only 9 o'clock, but you decide you are entirely ready to go home. They stay behind, trapped by their uncomfortable clothes and their silent debts. You simply walk out the door perfectly invisible and perfectly free. This brings us to the 7th moment. It happens a few weeks later, on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning at the office. Your coworker's phone buzzes on the counter. It is a notification from their credit card company, summarizing the damage from last month's networking outfits. You watch their face completely drop. A massive, unexpected bill just hit their account, and they have absolutely no emergency fund to cover it. Suddenly, you don't see a luxury designer bag anymore. You just see a massive, invisible shackle made entirely of high-interest consumer debt. This is the brutal reality of the leverage trap. They borrowed money to look wealthy today, entirely sacrificing their actual freedom tomorrow. You watch them slump back to their desk, and for the first time, you don't feel a single ounce of jealousy. Instead, you look down at your cheap, unbranded shirt. There are absolutely no hidden chains attached to these seams. While they leveraged their future just to buy an expensive uniform, you quietly leveraged your savings to buy a permanent shield. Not because you are smarter, not because you don't like nice things, but because a zero balance on a credit card is the most comfortable thing you can possibly wear. You turn back to your computer and calmly resume your work. Across the room, your coworker nervously bites their nails, paralyzed by a piece of paper. They have to keep this job. They have to tolerate every bad meeting and every toxic boss. Their closet demands it. But you could walk out the door tomorrow and your boring wardrobe wouldn't mind at all. Do you know what the ultimate flex of quiet wealth actually is? It is not never facing a crisis. It is facing a crisis without ever breaking a sweat. You've built your invisible shield. But eventually, the people playing the game always hit a breaking point, and you are about to see it firsthand. Later that afternoon, you walk past the glass walls of a small, soundproof corporate conference room. Inside, your coworker is pacing back and forth, holding their smartphone incredibly tight against their ear. They look incredibly expensive from the outside, but their face is completely drained of color, caught in a frantic, terrifying panic. You don't stop. You don't have to. You think a massive designer logo projects absolute strength, but right now it just looks like a heavy, ridiculous anchor. Not because the leather is cheap, not because the brand is fake, but because the desperate debt behind it is entirely real. Every single expensive item they bought to prove their success has slowly transformed into a suffocating high-interest shackle. You look down at your own simple cotton sleeves, feeling an overwhelming, quiet sense of absolute relief. Through the glass, they finally slump into a chair, rubbing their face in total, crushing exhaustion. Have you ever realized why they tolerate so much stress? Because without this monthly paycheck, Their entire luxury illusion instantly collapses. One missed check. Total disaster. But you walk away, completely untouched by that fear because you stopped playing their dangerous game years ago. You sit at your desk and open your own banking app, looking at a very different kind of screen. Not a negative balance, not an overdue warning. Just a quiet, boring, unglamorous number sitting safely in your emergency fund. It doesn't shine like gold, but it guarantees that you will never ever have to make that desperate phone call. Which brings us to the final moment. The moment you step back and look at the actual math of your quiet choices. You open a simple spreadsheet. On one side is the path of the flashy, heavily branded wardrobe. On the other side is your path. Let's track that $500 designer coat. The moment you walk out of the luxury store, its financial value immediately begins to plummet. 3 years later, it is completely out of style, sitting in the back of a closet, worth absolutely nothing. But if you take that same money and buy a simple $15 shirt, you have $485 left over. You put that remaining money into a quiet, boring index fund. It doesn't look impressive today, but it is working tirelessly in the background. 10 years pass. The designer coat is long gone, but your boring investment has quietly doubled, then tripled completely unseen. Now multiply that by every single shirt, every pair of shoes, and every luxury belt you intentionally chose not to buy. The difference between the two columns on your spreadsheet is staggering. It is not just a pile of extra money. It is literally years of your life bought back. Years you do not have to spend sitting in a corporate cubicle. While the people playing the status game are mathematically forced to work well into their 60s just to maintain their expensive illusion, you close the spreadsheet. You don't need a financial advisor to tell you who is actually winning the game. Because the ultimate luxury isn't a loud logo that everyone recognizes. The ultimate luxury is having quiet options that nobody else knows about. You pack up your simple bag at the end of the workday. Your cheap shirt is still perfectly comfortable. You are ready to walk out the door exactly as you came in. But there is one last thing you need to see. You walk out into the office lobby. Your coworker is standing there, waiting for a ride home in their designer clothes, but the artificial halo is completely gone. They just look incredibly tired, carrying the heavy weight of their financial choices. You walk right past them completely unnoticed. You don't feel the need to gloat or show off, because you finally understand that true wealth isn't about proving you are better than anyone else. It is simply about proving absolutely nothing to absolutely no one. You arrive back at your modest apartment, leaving the noisy corporate game entirely behind you. You walk into your bedroom and stand in front of the exact same wooden mirror. You look down at the simple $15 cotton fabric of your unbranded shirt. Remember the question from the very beginning of this journey? When exactly does a plain, boring shirt become the ultimate status symbol? It happens the moment you realize that true power isn't forcing people to look at you. It is having the absolute financial freedom to completely disappear. The characters and stories in this video are fictional and created for illustrative purposes based on common financial situations, not real individuals. The content in this video is for entertainment and illustrative purposes about money psychology and is not investment or personal financial advice. Please do your own research or consult a licensed financial professional before making decisions.